So this is session 3 of Civics 101 for Kansas City, Cycle 1 Icy Stars. Um, so we have our presentations due next week. So we'll just put that up here just to remind everybody. All right. And if there are any questions or concerns, you could book a session with me or email me, whatever you'd like. And the link is on the screen, and I'll also put it into the chat also. If you're in need to book some time, that's fine. Just go right ahead. Here's the link. Boom, there you are. All right. So I'll just pause for a moment in case there are any questions about the assignment. No, seems to be okay. Go ahead. Hey, Gustavo, hi. You have something?
Yeah, I do. I'm just curious. So the deadline next week, December the 8th, that's when everyone will be presenting during that session. Is that correct?
Yes. So it would be awesome if everyone could get me their PowerPoint like 2 days before that, by the Wednesday. That would be awesome. And that way I have a chance to check them out. Sometimes it needs somebody's presentation needs a little revision, perhaps. They might have missed an element, something like that. So it gives us a chance to, maybe have a little back and forth. Okay. I'd say, out of 15 interns, there's like 1 or 2 that are, maybe need a little adjustments or something like that. Okay. Anyhow,
Okay.
that'll give you a chance to do that, and then put them on our website, the class website, so they'll be there in time for the next session. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So to review, we have wanted to understand this thing called civic engagement, and the approach that I like to take is with these 3 domains. I call them sometimes buckets, buckets of stuff. But they are civic heart, civic brain, and today, in a little bit, we're going to get into the civic muscle. And the idea was, before we talk about whether you're volunteering or if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, if you're not if you're an independent or any of that stuff, we thought it was important to ask you what's in your heart. Where do you stand with regard to your fellow human beings? What kind of person are you that you bring to the civic party? All right, and there was a really good discussion about what should be in the civic heart, what kind of person you need to be as you approach this work, and the word empathy came up again and again, and I think there was a lot of agreement that this idea of well, for lack of a better term, civic love, caring, that kind of thing. People said being able to put yourself into someone else's shoes, being able to see the world from the other point of view, seemed to be a very fundamental quality. And I think there was a lot of agreement, and I certainly agree with that. And so I introduced the concept of Ubuntu, an African concept, way of being. I am because you are. That's fundamental to a lot of societies and ways of life in that continent. And we talked a little bit more about, like, okay, so what does it really look like? How do you know someone is being empathetic? Like pretty granular in the weeds there. And there was a lot of great discussion, and I really could spend like another 2 whole days just unpacking what you all brought to that conversation. But one thing came up again that was pretty consistent, was this idea of deep listening. So before you can be empathetic, or let's say on the path to empathy, or they seem to be interlocked, is how good a listener are you? And that seemed to be a shorthand for a lot. Mean like I'm here for you. I'm physically present and attending to you. I'm not being distracted. I'm not playing with my phone, things like that. But also, I'm intentionally placing myself in a space of sort of humbleness and just saying, like, I'm not judging you. I just really want to hear you. It's important to me to actually hear you and understand. And so we talked a little bit about how you might do that. And people were saying, well, you could lean into somebody, and give them those cues, like, your physical body. People said you could ask questions like, "Hey, Brenda, I'm not sure I heard you. Brenda, could you say that again?" Or, "Hey, Sarah, I think what I heard you say was this, blah 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 blah." And then Sarah goes, "Yeah, yeah, that's good, Tom. You got that." Or, "No, no, I didn't actually say that." So there were people were saying those kinds of habits are sending strong cues to your partner, to your colleagues, that you are very interested in what they're saying, and you're not waiting to jump on their shoes, like, just, you're not signaling like, just shut up so I can talk. That kind of behavior. And we get very excited. We're very passionate about our work, and some of us are very chatty and can put a lot of information in a short space, and others are more deliberate and a little slower in our rhythms. That's just how we roll. So those of us that are kind of fast, kind of da 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 da, that's just how we roll. That's just how we're wired. Sometimes we need to slow down and just give the other person some space. And we use the image of jazz, the jazz combo. So those of you who are musically inclined or like jazz, you know that a good combo, someone takes the lead and the rest sit back and sort of listen and support. But it's not always it can't be the same guy soloing the whole time. That's not how jazz works. You move in and out. You move in and out. You give the floor, you receive the floor. You step forward in the music or in life, and then you step back. Okay. So I'm going to put now into the chat a an article from the Harvard Business Review, and it's about how to be a good listener. So, like a lot of these things that we're speaking of, there it's in the chat now. You can go to the civic gym. You can go to the listening gym and work on some of these things if you so have a mind to. And if you download and print this out, you'll see that there's some pretty concrete steps, some advice, that kind of thing, some exercises maybe, or habits that you can get into to make yourself a better listener. And if you do it, I'd be interested in hearing, even after the class is over, if anybody wants to email me and just tell me how it went. Did anyone follow the guidelines or, use the advice from the article? I'd be very interested to hear this. All right. So very briefly, that's kind of where we are up to this point. Now, we talked about empathy and love. That's sort of the civic basics, which I definitely agree with. Ubuntu is that concept of I am because we are. Deep listening, we landed on as being perhaps a very important skill to build our empathy muscles. And then we introduced this concept of servant leadership. We asked the question, can one serve and lead at the same time? And I think that landed well for a lot of people. It seemed to make some sense. The examples that you brought to the table about leaders seem to have that quality. And the guy that was the originator of this concept is Robert Greenleaf. And he was a business leader in the 50s and 60s. But the thing that he said was this, that's on the screen: the servant leader is a servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve. The natural feeling that's in your heart. Remember, we were talking about, I can't make you want to be generous. I can model it. I can be generous to you, and you can decide to be generous to me or not. It's up to you. It's up to each of us. So he sort of makes that point by saying it starts with a natural feeling. It's in your heart that you want to help, you want to serve. It pleases you. It makes you feel good. It feels necessary to you to do so. There's no compensation. We're not talking about pay. We're not talking about rank. We're not talking about anything like that. It's what's in your heart when we start. So that's what Mr. Greenleaf said, and I just believe that to be true. And I think you're surrounded, in Icy Stars by people who are practicing that every day. And here's another way to look at it. You can see this traditional versus servant leaders. Everyone sees that slide? Yes? Just checking. Good. Okay. All right. So again, this is just another quick way to contrast this model of servant leadership with what I think a lot of people assume or traditionally call a leader. So traditional leaders, they seek leadership as a rank to obtain. I want to be the CEO. I want to be the general. I want to be some big politician. But the servant leader sees an opportunity to serve others. So that's the two differences there. The traditional leader uses power and control to drive a performance, whereas the servant leader shares power and control, shares it, flattens out the leadership chart. So the traditional organizational chart is very like this, like a pyramid, right? With one person at the very tippy top and all of us peons down here. The servant leader flattens that out and places themselves more in sort of direct relationship with people and wants other people to step up and lead. That's a very big feature of this. You're trying to bring other people behind you. So a good servant leader is kind of, I guess you could say, almost a coach in a way. That's another good word I like to use. The traditional leader measures success through output. Well, how much have you earned today? How many widgets did you produce? That sort of thing. The servant leader looks at success through the growth and development of the people that he or she is leading. So a good test of servant leadership is the people that you're leading, you're supposed to be leading. At the end of the day, are they any better? Are they happier? Are they healthier? You know what I mean? Are they more able to be leaders themselves? So if you've been around the bend, 20 years as a leader, and then you look at all your people and they're still sick and sad and poor and they can't really do for themselves, you haven't done your job. So you want to get replaced. The idea is as you bring people up behind you, you'll be able to step aside someday and pass the baton. And that's good. That's a good thing. Okay. That's a mark of your success as a leader, as you're working with your people and whatever the project is, even inside Icy Stars, as a committee or as a team. Are you able to coach others up so they can be as effective as you are? The traditional leader does a lot of speaking, but our kind of leader does a lot of listening, and that's very consistent with just what we were talking about, a big listener. The traditional leader thinks it's all about them. What, you mean it's not about me? It's not the Tom show? Well, strong people have strong egos. I'm not going to deny that. And you got to be, a strong person to be in this world, in this kind of civic world. But the civic leader that we're speaking about understands it's really not about them. Now, they may be out in front. They may be called to make a lot of decisions. They may be called to speak to the press and all kinds of things that look leadershipy. But at the end of the day, it's really not about me and my thing. It's about the community's thing. Are we pushing the community forward? And are they getting better because of us, because of this work? Okay, so that's the servant leadership in a nutshell. And how does that land with people, by the way? Please unmute and just react to this concept. That'd be awesome.
I actually did have a question for you, Tom. Do you think that a servant leader could be successful but leave a negative impact for those they're serving? Like, in other words, could they You know,
Yeah.
not sure what I'm asking.
Well, so okay, so that's an interesting question. So someone can be a very powerful leader like Hitler. So we're not going to deny Hitler was a very powerful and successful leader, but he was not a servant leader as we're speaking of. He was a dictator, right? So you can be a powerful and I'll say effective leader and be horrible, and kill tens of millions of people, and I think there are many leaders, and they're mostly white men, but not 100%, but who have that distinction of having risen to the top of their whatever, their nation or their, and all we have to show for it is millions of people dead. So I would say, in that sense, you can have a great leader in that world, in that word, who is actually horrible for their people. The servant leader, not so much. If the person is following the precepts that we are trying to explain, they may make mistakes. We're not talking about people who are perfect. They may make mistakes, but the servant leader, their goal is to help and nurture and bring people up. So I would say that's how I would respond. Zoya, yes, please.
I feel like I'm really used to seeing traditional type of leadership just in my life in general. And so this idea of servant leadership actually wasn't introduced to me until I was more grounded in my faith and in like a healthy church.
Mm.
And they talk about servant leaders a lot. But my question for you is, do you feel like there's a time and a place for servant leadership and a time and a place for traditional leadership? Or should we just do away with traditional leadership? Because it's obviously left some horrible
Yeah,
taste in like the majority
that's a
of people's
great
mouth.
question, a provocative question, I would say. Listen, if it was up to me,
Provocative.
if you made me the king of the world, or just like with my magic wand, I'd do away with most of these traditional leaders because you know what? This planet is heading to doom.
Mhm.
All I have to say is just look at the evidence. So look around America. How are we doing? How's the planet doing? Um,
Right.
saying that the evidence is not strongly in favor. Now, there are people who will say, look, you're attacking capitalism, you're attacking, traditional norms here, and that, capitalism has lifted billions of people out of poverty. So there are people who will say, look, if you looked at the planet, 100 years ago, there'd be, 2 billion people making $1 a day or something like that. They give you those kinds of numbers. And then they'd say, look, today, you only have a half a billion, there's only 1 billion people making $1 a day. And I say, yes, but look how many species have been extinct. Look at slavery hasn't gone away. We still have slavery all over the planet. Um, look how much there is wealth inequity in terms of the very few and the very many. So for every fact that someone who wants to defend the system would bring to the party and say, yeah, but Tom, we're not doing that badly. I would have like 20 facts to say I strongly disagree. But that's just me. I
Yeah,
recognize
I was.
it's a capitalist society and we have to make the best of it. Yes, please. Zoe, did you want to say something else?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. I think I agree with you. I think I fully agree with you, and I like programs like Icy Stars because, again, the first time I ever heard about servant leadership was actually in a healthy church, and to see that, oh my gosh, it's not just something that's in the church; it's actually something that's being implemented,
Hmm.
like in the world. It's not just something that's in a bubble. Is really enlightening, and it makes me feel like the world is becoming a safer place.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, that speaks to how unusual an organization like Icy Stars is. That Sandy and her colleagues have created something that is not what I would say normal, in terms of the marketplace. But that's the whole point, right? So through the civic imagination of Sandy and her team, they have created this thing called Icy Stars, which fits in the traditional nonprofit model. In other words, we didn't really have a chance to go deeply into nonprofits, but the idea is you are the product, right? It's not, we're not making iPhones, we're not making socks. That's not the product. We're not making pizza pies. We're making leaders. So in a way, you're the product if you want to think of it that way. But there's no one owns Icy Stars. So Sandy Kestrel does not own Icy Stars. She cannot sell Icy Stars to the wealthiest person in Kansas City, whoever she or he might be. If that person says, I want to just buy this Icy Stars thing and put it in my portfolio, she can't do it because she doesn't own Icy Stars. It's owned by the community on behalf of the board of directors. So the board of directors stands for the community, and they are managing Icy Stars for the future. So if God forbid Sandy gets hit by a bus tomorrow, Icy Stars lives on because it's bigger than her. It's bigger than even the people who are running the Kansas City operation. So that being said, what has been created is a non-capitalist model where you are going to be trained by the community in the name of the community to go work in business, but it's really more than just business. We really want a bigger thing going on here than just making a good living, which is awesome, and we certainly hope that you do so. But the secret sauce is we really want you to go out and change the world for the better. And that's not a normal thing, okay? It just isn't. But that's why Icy Stars is so special and so amazing, right? All right. So anything else want to add about this idea of servant leadership? Your point about the church is very true. The idea of a leader of a congregation. Sometimes we hear the term being a shepherd in a flock. I know that's a Christian kind of thing, but for many faiths, there is this idea of the religious person, the imam, the rabbi, whoever that religious leader is sort of a shepherd, as it were, ministering, helping the congregation, not just with religious instruction, but with being, with the travails and tragedies of everyday life, life cycle events, births, deaths. In my faith and religion, in the Jewish faith, there's the bar mitzvah. So this is when you become a person, a man or a young woman. That's at 13 years old. So these life cycle events are guided by the religious figures, and so they have that kind of fatherly, motherly, vibe, besides their religious instruction that they're trying to teach you. All right, and so we're not saying that to be a servant leader you have to believe in God or be religious. That's not what I'm saying here. But you do have that thing in your heart that you want to help and serve, and maybe minister. Again, is again a word that is both religious and non-religious. All right, so that's a little bit about servant leadership. Had we more time, we could spend a whole class on it. It's really fascinating. There's a lot of stuff we could unpack about it, and we can get into it in more detail. But I think that's a pretty good take on it. All right, let's go back to sharing my slides with you, please. Here we go. All right. So we covered a little bit about the distinctions between the servant and traditional leader. I think that's enough said for now. But now we then pivoted to the civic brain. We went from the heart to the brain, and we asked the same kind of question. It's like, what do you think should be in the civic brain? And there was so much good content. There's so many good ideas. Again, we could have spent a whole nother session just delving into some of the things that you were talking about. For example, one of the things I just don't have the time to deal with, but what came up very heavily was critical thinking. That came up several times in your discussions. And I used to teach a class on that called Who's Lying to You Now? Introduction to Civic and Media Literacy and Critical Thinking. So just know that I'm with you 100% on critical thinking. But the thing that I really responded to that you mentioned several times was this idea of knowing your history, sort of knowing the context. And I want to introduce to you this young man, Khalil Green. He is called the Gen Z historian. He was the first Black president of the Yale student body. He has over 70,000 followers on Instagram and over 500,000 on TikTok. And he says, you don't necessarily grow up thinking you're going to be the first person to do anything in this world. But if you work hard and you dream big, it can and will happen. So says Khalil. And I'll put some information about him into the chat. So here is his biography. You can sort of check this out if you want. Yeah, here he is. Check this out. And also, you can hear him being interviewed. This is on NPR radio. Yeah, here it is. I'll put this link into the chat as well. Yeah, here it is. But for right now, let's take a listen to him and how he does his history thing on TikTok, which, you know, as you may be familiar with, is a media platform for very short pieces of content. So let's listen to this section from Mr. Green, and let's see what he has to say. He's going to be talking about, he's reacting to some of his followers made an observation that he is going to expound upon. Here we are. Okay, so let's make sure that everyone can see this. All right, you can see the screen. There's Khalil. Everybody sees that? Good. Okay, here we go.
So I just saw one of my followers say that all popular dystopian fiction stories are based off of white people's fears of things that were already done to black and or indigenous people at some point in American history. And now I can't unsee it. So here's part one of the United States' dystopia. So in the Hunger Games, kids are forced to fight each other for the entertainment of the ruling class. And in real life, black kids did this up to the 1950s in something called Negro Battle Royales. In The Handmaid's Tale, mothers are forced to give up their children to other families. And in real life, some enslaved mothers were literally forced to produce children for slave labor, and when these children were born, they were sold never to see their families again. And to add in some indigenous history, for centuries, many native kids were kidnapped to live with white families or be sent to residential boarding schools, and as is being discovered, many of these kids were murdered and put in unmarked graves. In The Maze Runner, young men are unethically put through medical experimentation to find a cure for a deadly disease. And in the Tuskegee study, 40 black men were lied to as they died from syphilis and were being experimented on by the US government for over 40 years. And in Divergent, the worst fear of the main character is to live in a crumbling part of the city where people are unable to afford housing, food, or other basic necessities. And that just sounds like it mimics the reality of all the redlined and terribly underinvested black communities throughout major cities in the United States. But what did I miss, and do you want a part 2? Let me know in the comments and follow for more. So I just saw one of my followers say,
All right. So now that's a different way to do history, is it not? How does that land with you? What do you make of Mr. Green and his short take on history?
I love all those books.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's certainly more interesting in all the history classes that I've taken in the past. Makes you want to engage.
Yeah, right. And it's under 2 minutes. So think about how much he packed into a very short period of time. Anything else that people want to react to that brief video?
I would say that he changed my perception because I've seen all of those, and it changed my perception in, like, what was that, a minute?
A minute, not even 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, it speaks to me on so many levels. First of all, he's a young man, and he's already gone deep into history. So you don't have to be an old, fuddy-duddy to be a scholar, obviously. And you can sort of challenge the norm by using creativity. So he's using these popular movies, these books that millions and millions of people have read, and he's saying, you know what, hold on here. We can learn something. We can enjoy these movies and these books fine, but I think there's something deeper here that I'd like to share with you. And he brings his perspective. Now, he obviously is a young African American male, so he's bringing his, himself and his thoughts, the way he's looking at America, and he packed it all together. You notice, you see his face. He's talking, so we're seeing him, and then he's got the screens. He's like, there's a lot. It's dense because he's using the images of the books, which are familiar to us, but then he also has done historic research, and he's found these older images. You notice there was like an old black and white print of these guys boxing each other. I mean, he's pulled that from the record. He's pulled these from. He's done his research. So there's a lot going on, and obviously he has many more videos along these lines. And so it triggers for me this idea of whose history, gets saved. Whose story gets told from what point of view. And so I think when we're speaking about our civic knowledge, our civic brain, we want to be mindful of who's speaking, who's telling the story, right? And we don't need to accept their assumptions necessarily. And so, first of all, are these stories even being told? So if you've never heard of the Tuskegee experiment, obviously you're not going to be able to, bring that to your civic party. You've never heard of the Tuskegee experiment, you should look it up. So that is a very sad part of American history. But some of these other things that Mr. Green mentioned, maybe you heard of them, maybe you didn't. So why didn't you hear of them? So it's like you said, I've taken history in high school, I took history in college, I'm pretty well read. I read the newspapers. Those stories were not being told. So be a truth teller, I think is what Mr. Green is telling us. Tell your story. Be sure your story is heard. Don't get written out of the record. Be mindful if people are being written out of the record, and you can do something about it. I mean, there's a lot going on with that little video. Is what I'm saying. But you said you want to know context, so Mr. Green is one of the people that I share with you who is gone deep into that, and he's got many more videos where that came from. Does that make sense? This idea of context. Does anybody want to speak to that in terms of the civic brain, bringing that kind of knowledge to your civic work? That makes sense. Oh, see something in chat here. Be a truth teller. Yeah. Thank you. Obviously there's other kinds of context. You could read history. You could try to read authors who are not normally quoted. So if you're reading, the mainstream press, I would encourage you to read press that is maybe not so mainstream. Like I subscribe to The Guardian. Okay, so this is an English newspaper that's very critical of America, and they're a little harsher on us than maybe the American press is. So that's my way of trying to make sure I'm not in an echo chamber, because I feel like a lot of American media is very constrained. It's kind of white, if you will. You know what I mean? And
Excuse me, what was the name of
it's The Guardian.
publication?
Yeah, I'll put it in the
Guardian.
Guardian. It's a British publication. They have a physical newspaper, but their online presence is amazing. So
Thank you.
So other people have said, well, maybe you obviously have to know, how the federal government works, that the three branches of government, all those kinds of things we take as a base. You've got to know the three branches of government. Obviously, you've got to know, that you're in Kansas. What kind of state is Kansas? Is it a red state or a blue state? What's the politics of your state? What's the politics of Kansas City? These are things that we talked about as terms of context as well. All right. So there's one more thing I want to share with you before we go to break, and then after break we'll talk about civic muscle, and that is this. We've mentioned leadership now a lot, and it's a very big deal for me, and we spent some time on this concept of servant leadership. But there's another aspect to this equation that I want to bring to your attention, and that's called the followers. What about the people who are not the leader, but we can't all be leaders? You know, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you might be a leader occasionally, you know, and do things, but what about the rest of the time? So I want to share this. It's about 5 minutes of video, and it's called "How to Start a Movement." It's one of the most favorite things I see in my civics, and that I share with my students. So let's watch this little video, and then we can have a see what you think of it. So let's see if I can get it up here.
I used one simple webinar presentation to produce $2 million in the past 12 months, and it was 100% automated. I didn't post.
I'll have to Kyle. Can everyone hear the video?
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, TED. Thanks.
All right, so what do people make of the shirtless dancing guy and the people who came to join him in this 5-minute video? What civic skills were going on here, do you think?
That video made me so happy to watch. It made me so happy to watch. Anybody else?
Why?
I feel like honestly, because I can relate to a lot of the things like that he said in the video, but also it's just it just kind of reminds me of like monkey see, monkey do. And something that I've had to like learn about leadership is it's definitely like you have to actually like set an example. and don't be afraid to continue to set that example until other people do notice. But it's hard to be it's hard for people to follow if they don't actually know what they're following. If the dance moves are a little bit too hard, you might have to like dumb them down
Well,
just a little bit. Not
yes,
everybody's
but that's a great point, because it happened so fast. When
yeah.
the first follower joined the shirtless dancing guy, it happened like literally in a blink of an eye. The shirtless dancing guy gently corrected him. Okay, so the first follower was going like this, but the dancing guy went like this or something. You know, he gave him a cue, and he gave him a loving correction that was instantly embraced. So the first follower adjusted himself a little bit to match the shirtless dancing guy. So you're right.
Yeah.
So if he's crazy, then that I can't follow, and no amount of coaching will help me. So you got to be, something that I can follow, and then correct me. I'm here. I want to be corrected, and I don't mind it. It sounds
Yeah.
funny, but it's deep.
Like steady or
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And also like because like the second person started dancing, I realized that like, oh, good leaders are actually like really good followers too. Because even back to what you said, when they were gently corrected or whatever, like the dance continued.
The dance
And he
continues,
continued to follow. But yeah,
and
good leaders are good followers too.
yeah, and so I think if we actually could break that video down and like almost go by frame, what I would say is that the dance probably changed over however long this video lasts, 5 minutes, whatever, 6 minutes, and that the new followers changed it also, but it still kept it in the vibe. You know what I mean? It evolved, and that's also, I think, a sign of a good society. This little society that they created, in the moment, was they were all kind of listening to each other, as it were. So one of the takeaways possibly is you may be a shirtless dancing guy or person, in your life going forward. And more power to you. I mean, I'm my much respect if that's your role in life, but it's more likely that we're going to be the second guys, the second person, the second person to the dance. And that takes as much courage in a way, is what Derek is suggesting, as to be the shirtless dancing guy, or the shirtless dancing person. So if you're the second to the party, that's critical, is what we're saying here in this dance of leadership. And your role is crucial. And you're signaling to the rest of the world, there's something valuable here. Come and check it out. It's not just one person doing wacky shit, but I'm saying there's value here. And you trust me, you know me, so come check it out. You're sort of like the ambassador, if you will, if you're the second person or the third person. Anyway, I love that video. There's a lot there that is sort of vibes with what we're talking about. All right, let's take a break for 5 minutes. It's 1:45. Let's get back at 1:50, and we'll continue on with the civic muscle. Okay, we're back from our break for Civics 101, or Cycle 1, IC Stars Kansas City. Now, we're about ready to get into the last domain, if you will, of our concept of civics. And we've talked about the civic heart, and we mentioned again, that's the first thing that comes first. Before we get any further, we gotta know what's in your civic heart. We had a pretty good conversation about what kinds of facts should be in the civic brain. What should you know? What kinds of facts, the context that the history, those sorts of things to be in your civic brain. And now let's talk about the civic muscle. We're looking here now for the kinds of activities that you should be able to do or have done. What kinds of accomplishments, things that you have been built, that you made, or things that you have run. So now we're getting into this idea of activities and actions. And so we're going to send you into small groups as we've done in the past to ask you to noodle on what should be this a measure of your civic muscle. And we're going to ask you to use the famous Zoom boards, the Jam boards. And again, there'll be 4 groups, and so there's 4 boards. Here is the link. So why don't you grab that, if you would, grab that link and make sure it's open on your browser so you can see it. And again, there's we'll have the 4 groups. I think there'll be 3 people in each group. You'll have 10 minutes to work on this assignment. Please pick someone to be a reporter. Okay. Okay, we're coming back from our small group session where people were asked to noodle on the concept of the civic brain. And the Jamboards are packed with stuff that I'm talking about. Rich content here. So let's see what we got. Thank you, all groups, for jumping in as you always do. So, group 1, please step up and tell us what did you come up with?
Yeah, so the civic muscle you can use for a lot of things. You got to have good community outreach. You got to have policy research. You can network with your community leaders, which is strong too. Volunteerism. And if you don't have time or money, just using your communication skills to kind of branch out in your community and help out all the ways you can.
So, policy research, what is that?
Just making sure you're up to date on new policies that are going out into your community so you understand them and how they might be able to affect the people around you.
And how do you do that?
Research, use the internet, the government releases them with voting.
So part of what we need to do in this work is to be lifelong learners. So I guess that's kind of a civic heart kind of thing, I suppose. You know, you have the desire to be a learner, but which also is sort of like you've got to be a little humble, right? So that's the civic heart, and then the civic skill would be where's the library? You know, how do I use the internet? I mean, we say the internet now pretty casually, like, oh yeah, the internet, I know what the internet, but actually it's kind of a skill that you'd have to learn. Well, are you using a database? So for example, if you have a public library card from Kansas City, you can go on any computer and access various databases, such as Wilson Select or Academic Press. Oh, Valeria, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you meant to unshare your screen.
Yes, I wanted to see you people talking.
Oh, okay.
We'll go back to see what has put up. So
Okay.
just yeah, it's cool. So we're just riffing for a minute on this idea of research. That's all I'm saying. So I agree totally, Isaiah, that yeah, as a learner, as a civic learner, you're kind of curious and interested, like, okay, they're going to pass a law in Illinois that you don't need cash bail anymore. So that's the first time that's happened. That's a law that was passed by activists working with the legislature. So if you run afoul of the police in the state of Illinois, you're not going to be kept in prison just because you don't have cash bail, which is a huge civil rights issue. There's many folk languishing in the prison because they don't have $500 or whatever the judge said. We don't know if they're innocent or guilty, but we haven't even gotten that far yet. You know what I'm saying? But people have lost their jobs, people have lost their families, people have lost all kinds of things before they got their day in court because they simply couldn't afford bail. So that's a great policy to know of, to say, or put it the other way around, say you don't have that in your state and it's the opposite, so that you know that that's an injustice, that you if you got arrested in the state of Missouri or the state of Kansas, you get stuck with a big bail and you could be there for a year while you're trying to, you know what I'm saying, make bail to plead your case, let alone if you can afford a lawyer. All right. So yeah. So using the internet wisely and smartly, absolutely. Okay, you also said networking. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So with networking, I've been able to meet a bunch of people in our community and just work together with them, listen to their ideas, kind of see where they're coming from. And then you guys can create events too, making those connections to kind of spread your message a little bit more to the community as well.
So networking is a skill, and I think maybe they talk about it inside Icy Stars. I know they have the teas, people are brought to you, right?
Mhm.
And and so that's networking. And I hope, do you guys have business cards?
I don't have a business card. We
All
definitely
right.
need to invest in some.
All right. Well, I would encourage everyone to create a business card, and this could be a group project. If someone would like to come up with a design, Icy Stars Cycle 1 Universal Business Card, or if people just want to be creative, like my business card, it looks like this. It sort of mirrors the Chicago flag. So if you're familiar with
It's beautiful,
Chicago
Tom.
flag, you'll understand what I'm getting at. Because that's the color of the flag, the 4 stars, right? And there's my information. But I also use the back of it. So the back of it is a commercial for my book. So and I use I use Vistapress or something like that. It's like I think for $50 you get like 500 cards, so it's pretty cheap. There's probably places in Kansas City that would print up cards for pretty cheap. But anyhow, the point is, to your point, Isaiah, about networking. So someone comes to Icy Stars like for the tea or whatever to be a speaker. Everybody got to give them their card. You know what I'm saying? You got to go up to that speaker and go, "Hey, Mr. Jones, thanks so much for coming. I was really interested in what you said. Here's my card. Can I get your card?" Okay. And then what do you do with it? Well, this is part of your civic habit, your civic skill. Everybody should have a database. Now, this sounds really crazy, but I use a tool called MailChimp. So when you guys are getting the email newsletter from me, that's going through MailChimp. So I put people's names and emails into my email list. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to have an email newsletter. No, but at some point, you may want to send a message to people in your orbit like, "Hey, I'm going to give a presentation," or, "Hey, I just got a scholarship to some news." And it's okay to send an email out to your list, right? But or even if you don't want to be that crazy, you just want to remember who you talked to. So Valeria came and spoke at the tea, and she blew your mind, and she works at a company, and now you want to go, "You know what? I think I want to reach out to her because I want to get a job there. I don't have her card. How do I Hey, Cecilia, did you get Valeria's card?" It's like you're kind of casting around, like, "Oh, Phil spoke to her. Phil knows how to get in touch with her." Okay, fine. But if nobody did that, then she's gone. And you'd have to say, "Gustavo, can you hit me up with Valeria's email address? I want to send her an email. I'd like to, do an interview with her." You know what I'm saying? So all I'm saying is when people come to you and you have a card and you ask for their card, that's your networking. You're showing some respect and interest, like, "I hear you, you impressed me," but you're also showing a little kind of aggressive professionalism. Like, "Here's my card," and it depends on what you say on your card. You could say on your card your skills, like excellent coder, excellent facilitator, experienced mentor and coach. You think about your own abilities, and you could put that on the card if you so choose. Anyway, we could spend a lot of time talking about networking, obviously, but yes, that is for sure a good muscle to build. Absolutely. Okay, group 2, what do you got? Group 2.
Yeah, we said like support your education and your elders, volunteering, farming, organic farming and urban farming, being more energy efficient, and water conservation, using public transports or buying an electric car, and engaging in civic conversations respectfully. Know your government, participate in our civic organizations again, and recycling, networking, and building diverse groups. I think that's the gist of everything. Activism.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned a couple of things. Volunteering was the first thing I heard you say. So speak to us a little bit about the volunteering piece.
Um, as a lot of you know, there's a lot of places to volunteer, and there's a lot of benefits of volunteering. It just depends on what type you're doing and you know, what your burning issue is, but I'm pretty sure there's volunteering for every burning issue.
Right. So what that says is you kind of got to know what groups are available. So in your community, there could be a church, there could be a youth group, there could be a sports team or a park, you know, so it presupposes that you got to lay of the land. So if you're so disposed to volunteer, where would you go? Do you want to go far from your house? I mean, maybe you don't have a car, so that's not an option. So you'd say, well, I don't mind. I would like to volunteer for something that serves youth, but since I don't have a car, it's got to be within a 15 to 20-minute walk of my house. Is there such a place? Oh, oh, yes, there is a YMCA. There's a Boys and Girls Club. There's a, you know, or there's a park not too far from my house, and I'm pretty good with sports, and I wouldn't mind coaching a soccer, you know, if there's any soccer kids, they need a coach. I happen to know that there's a park near me, and they're looking for coaches. So if I so choose, I could go down there on a Saturday and volunteer. Okay. You talked about being energy conservation, you know, sort of being conscious of the environment. Speak to that a little bit, if you would.
Well, we all live on the earth and we all need our environment to survive. So we have to take in account it as we do other people.
Right. So you mentioned recycling. So that's an activity right there by itself that could really be a big deal. So does Icy Stars Kansas City recycle? They do.
Yes.
I'd be surprised that they didn't, but it would be interesting to see if the whole building does, you know, or you know, where the block that you live on, that Icy Stars, wherever their offices are, you know, how is it for the whole city? You know, is there a group that could speak to that and say, you know, Kansas City sucks at recycling, you know, compared to other similar sized cities. I can tell you that Chicago totally sucks for a big city that's been around for so long, and we like to brag about all our civics. We reek in terms of what we leave on the table. We could do so much better. So if that was something that was really important to you, you could say, well, in my community, I don't see an easy way to do it. So I'm going to work with maybe the church or some other community group, and we're going to set up some bins, you know, in the parking lot. And I'm going to be the person that's going to, you know, be the boss of that. So I'm going to figure out how to get the bins. And oh, then I got to make a flyer. Oh God, I got to put a flyer out and say, hey, folk, don't throw your crap out. Bring them over to the parking lot on 10th Street, and bring your paper and your bottles and your cans. That's what we can take right now. And so you make a little flyer, and now back to the Isaiah's networking. You got something to say when you're networking with people. Say, by the way, you know, don't throw your plastics in the trash. Don't throw your cans in the trash. If you're reading newspapers, don't throw them out. It would be awesome if you could bring them over to the lot over there on 10th Street. Cool. And then you said to participate. You didn't use the word vote, but did you include voting?
Funny thing is, we included voting, but the sticky note that we had voting on is on someone else's slide. And I don't know whose slide that went on.
Okay. Well, you can grab it back. But yes, voting
Miss
is
Erin, did
is
you do
usually the first thing that people say when we get to civic muscle. So I sort of gave away the joke right there, but certainly that's a big one, obviously. But again, it's shorthand for a lot of other things. In order to know how to vote, you have to be registered. So we all know that if you move, you must re-register. Do we all know that? We do. Good. Okay. Well, some people are very transient. They got to move. They got to move. They get a new job, whatever. Their family obligations. What's life happens, and you got to move. Even if you move down the block, okay, you must re-register. So that's a hardship that America, we put on people. It's not everywhere on the planet that we make people do this, but it is a feature of American politics. And for some people, they just miss that chance. They just don't know, or it's too much trouble. And so there's a I would say maybe a third of the people who could vote can't vote because they don't register. Now, once you do register, it's a matter of remembering, oh, there's an election coming up. And can I vote? So if you're working full time, can I take time off to vote? Even though sometimes the polls open at 7 a.m, suppose you have an early shift that day and you're going to work late. So will your boss allow you to take some time off? Or if it's just simply not possible because you're going to be working or maybe traveling, will you be able to vote early? So that's an absentee ballot or another voting early at an early polling station, which means that you've got to know that. Now in Chicago, we allow early voting, mail voting, and same-day voting. So in Illinois, we've made it pretty easy. It's not the easiest place in America, but it's pretty darn easy, okay? Some states, especially in the South, are restricting people's access to the poll, especially people of color. Frankly, it's like they don't want you to vote. So they're making it harder and harder in some parts of America. And you got to know that too. Should your job or life take you into a state that is making it harder for people to vote, you got to know that and conquer it. But yes, voting is kind of is one of the fundamentals, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Awesome. Okay. Group three. What do you have?
We said physic muscle in my terms is just basically being physically involved in the community and environment, and being involved is like voting, youth engagement, conflict resolution during school council meetings, going to school board meetings and public gatherings, donating to causes, volunteering. I put the Boys and Girls Club on there because it reminded me of when I had a big once in my youth years, and I made a connection to that physic muscle.
Great.
Somebody, my big was doing his physic duties.
Great.
But yeah, that's what we got.
Well,
advocating.
So conflict resolution, that's a good one. That's an interesting one. More about that.
conflict resolution? Because if you're bringing a problem, if you're voicing your opinion about a problem, you should be able to have a solution or idea of how you want to solve the problem as well.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Okay. So that again is another kind of a civic muscle. So if you are going to a school board meeting or you're running a meeting, let's say, and there's strong feelings, in this meeting, yay or nay, whatever the issue you may be talking about, people feel very strongly. Are you able to moderate so that both sides are heard? Right? It's not a screaming match. We're not making it personal. You son of a, calling you names and such. So part of leading a meeting is setting what we call the ground rules. So a leader of a meeting, especially if you think it's going to be controversial, you could say things like, well, we're going to go into the public comment session now, or we're going to entertain comments from the community, or however, please be brief in your comments. Do not be personal, and don't take it personal. Keep all our comments professional, if you will, and try to speak in a positive manner. So you can kind of say those kinds of ground rules, you know what I'm saying, at the beginning, and you can sort of get affirmation from the body. Okay, does this all sound right to us? Is this good? Do we want to proceed in this way? Let's just sort of all show of hands, that kind of thing, And so as the leader, you've kind of set the table, so to speak, right? Now, it doesn't mean someone's going to get up and be a Yahoo and be, you never know in a public meeting, especially if it's controversial, someone may go off the deep end. That may happen. But if it's a typical community meeting and, you're a reasonable person and you set the table, that's usually good enough to handle even things that are very emotional, whatever the issue may be on the table at the moment. And people can say, I feel really strongly that, and then thank you, Tom, for your comments. Phil, did you want to respond? And Phil says, well, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm not really 100% with Tom's comments, because I feel You know what I'm saying? So we can continue on in that way, and it could be still very deeply felt issues, you know what I'm saying? And people can really feel strongly, and still we can get through the meeting, and have a good discourse. But yes, I'd almost say, through my experience, we're not really doing civics unless we have a disagreement. You know what I'm saying? Unless we get to a place where we get to know each other a little better. And you go, I don't agree with everything Isaiah says, but he says some good stuff occasionally, and I want to hear more so I can respond in kind. So that means we're doing it right, I think. If we're in a space where it's a little friction, there's a little friction there, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? There's a little friction, but we're moving forward in a respectful manner. And again, depending on what the meeting is, if it's a school board meeting or some other kind of meeting, there's official business, there's an agenda, it's set ahead of time. It may be a vote, that at some point we have to call the question. So everybody's had a chance to speak yay and nay. And then the chairman says, okay, we now have to call the question on this particular issue for those that can vote. All those in favor say aye. All those not in favor say nay. And then you move on. Now, part of the interesting things about conflict in meetings is if you're part of such a body, what happens if you lose the argument, like whatever the vote is? And this could be even in a group work meeting in IC Stars when you're part of a team, and you're trying to decide which way to go. What happens if the group decides not to go what you want to do? What do you do? Anybody?
Vote.
Yes, but now you voted. They voted and you lost the vote. So what happens now?
You keep fighting for your
loser.
cause.
Say what?
Keep the fight alive. That's right, y'all.
You've had your say, whatever the situation was, but the group went with the other plan. You got to go along with it. And you can say, hey,
so you can probably
go ahead.
You probably find a way to get your example in too. Okay, that one, but see, now I could try to find a way to get what I want done also.
You can. Yeah.
Through the loop a little, I found a way in.
Yeah, you could say there's a couple of ways you could proceed. You could say, well, I'm sorry the group didn't agree with me. I still feel strongly, but I will go along with the team. However, maybe as a concession, you guys might want to throw me a bone and give me a chance to speak or something. So you don't get 100% what you wanted, you know what I'm saying? But you might get 80% or 40%. What you don't do
helps.
Yeah, and what you don't do is be a poisoner or a bomb thrower and try to sabotage the group. Like, you didn't go my way. Screw you. I'm putting down the brakes on this. I'm going to withhold my energy. I'm going to withhold my. No, that's not how we proceed. Not in business and not in civics. We're not always going to win everything that we want to fight for, even though you may have many good arguments and feel so strongly about it. But in a good civic situation, like in a good business situation, you're going to win some and lose some. So the next time there's a committee meeting, Brenda's path will be followed. She will win that, and we will do exactly the way she wanted us to go on that particular path. And Erin will be second place on that argument, and that's fine. So sometimes you win it, sometimes you just kind of come in even Steven, all right? But yes, that is, again, it's a kind of a civic skill and attitude, I suppose, right? You're not going to be like the child who says, I didn't win, I'm taking the ball and going home. You know what I'm saying? That's not how we play. Maybe when you were 4 or 5, you took the ball and went home and everybody was left with nothing. That's not how we work, in good civics and good business. But again, you can see this is a very rich conversation we're having, and we could spend a lot more time just discussing this issue of conflict and how do we manage it, how do we navigate it. And again, the more passionate we are about things, the harder it is, to keep that even keel. I mean, I've been in situations where I've wanted to scream my head off, but that wasn't going to get us anywhere, really. Okay, awesomeness. Group 4. Please, what do you got?
Yeah, so I was in a group with Sarah and our board. We also share some of the same sentiments with other groups. We have has network relationships. That's important. I know we also had on here, even deeper to that, know your legislators. So network and have relationships with them. We have donating to causes, of course, going to vote, as you said, was usually the first thing that people write down. We also agreed with volunteering. We put protests on here because sometimes, sometimes action is needed. We have a couple long ones on here that I think are really important. Know who you are voting for and what change you're trying to see implemented. Align your beliefs, build relationships. We also have know the environment. So the environment affects community and even besides us in other countries. Be a leader for all. We have run. We have actually run for office and boards that you're passionate about. We have healthy communication on here. And advocacy as well. That's something that's really, really important to me. Be an advocate for the communities that you're passionate, but also other communities that are just silenced and things like that. We have write about it. We also have teach civics as well. We've got some pictures on there that we just found on the internet. Don't know who they are, but we felt like they fit these the model that we have for the civic muscle.
Yeah, these are superb. These are really great. Oh, look, I see myself on there. That's hysterical. Really, really good stuff here. Very rich. So again, you pick some of the easy ones like voting, which comes to people's minds right away. Protesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. So when you say protest, what do you mean?
What do I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily for a violent protest or anything like that. I am more of the Martin Luther route, silent protesting, sometimes legislation, the powers that be, they need to see you stand on what you are trying to have change. But also I think protests are really important too, because they can see the number of people who support and agree. And I think that definitely puts leadership on notice. Whereas I do think that, especially here in America, protests have kind of had have kind of strayed from those original ideals. It's also, I feel like they also stray because leadership doesn't care about peaceful things anymore. But that's what I think about protesting.
So there's a couple of great points here. First, it's public. So again, when we are protesting, we are out in the public space. So it's not something that we're not meeting in the house, we're not meeting in the church, we're not meeting in the conference room. We are outside. and it's usually disruptive. So it's usually something that is going to, could be a bunch of people, in the park, and it causes a bit of a fuss. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be shutting down traffic, but sometimes a march will go through a public street, and obviously it stops traffic. So I've seen people protest. They take over a highway so that no one can get on the highway. I've seen protesters to go where there's a lot of shopping, like around the holiday season. So people are trying to get to a very big shopping mall, but they can't because there's a bunch of people sort of blocking their way. So that's disruptive. So there could be a public protest in a park or a plaza that isn't really disrupting anything. It's not like you can't get to work or get to shopping, or what I'm saying, but it's huge and it calls attention. So it gets a lot of notice in the media. And so the numbers that you mentioned are important. So if you have a rally and you have 5 people there, that's kind of wimpy and not very much to celebrate. But if you have a rally or a march or some kind of, and there's 5,000 people, you better believe all your elected officials are going to pay attention. So sometimes a rally or a protest or some other kind of large public meeting has many, many different impacts. It's also requires a lot of planning. So if you are part of a group that is planning any kind of public meeting or rally or any kind of event, it's a lot of work behind the scenes. And so that's how we build some of our leadership skills. Because you gotta figure out where you're meeting. You have to get the law right. Do you need a permit? Do you have flyers? How do you get the word out about the meeting, right? How creative are you to inform the public that there's going to be a march or there's going to be a rally? And usually groups don't have a lot of money, so it's not like you can take out a full page ad in the papers, right? So how creative can you be to bring people to a rally? And then who's going to speak? So if Zoya, you're one of the speakers and you've got 3 minutes, what are you going to say? Right? So now you got to think about, how do I tell my story? I got 3 minutes. So it's like, hello, I'm Tom Tresser, and I'm a school teacher at PS 17 on 10th Street, and all our kids are cold because the school has no heating, and we're here to rally to fix our school up because it's a shame that our children they can't learn. They're all, what I'm saying? So I got to tell my story in a way that fits the moment, that gets our cause across.
Like an elevator pitch.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't ramble. So again, planning a rally and a public meeting there's a lot of work that goes into it. And each of the speakers, and it could be 4 or 5 speakers, each of them have to say something different. So if I'm the organizer of my rally, and the point is we need hot lunches at PS 17 on 10th Street, I'm going to have a speaker who's a teacher. I'm going to have maybe a student who's a speaker. I may have a worker from the kitchen as a speaker. You know what I'm saying? I may have someone who's an expert on child nutrition, who maybe it would be great if that woman was from the community, but the expert could be maybe from the local university. But the point is, each of these speakers are going to add to the impact of the event, and that the demand is we want hot lunches for PS 17. So we're going to pass out a petition now. Everyone sign the petition. You know what I'm saying? So this rally has been very carefully thought out, and it's a lot to do. I've done many rallies in my time. And then the idea of writing. Speak a little more about this idea of writing. This is good. What did y'all mean by that one?
Yeah. So we had. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. I see you.
It's important to spread awareness, and one of those levels of awareness is putting all your thoughts on paper. I mean, it's another form of media, so it gets people's attention, and it's nice to be organized and have everything in one spot.
I love this idea. Now, of course, I've written a couple of books. I've got a blog and all that stuff. And I think this is a great idea for people, even if you don't think of yourself as much of a writer. Some people have a very good skill at speaking, off the cuff, and it's the matter of like sometimes you might have to record yourself and then just write out, what you just recorded. But the idea of having a blog or a column or translating your thoughts into some sort of permanent thing like a book or pamphlet or some other thing, I think is awesome. And not everyone is up to that. And I'm not saying this is like the top of your list, but it's pretty powerful. Let me put it this way: I've been treated differently. I can say this with 100% as an author than I have been as just a loudmouth. You know what I mean? Just somebody who feels passionately about something. But because I've written a book, and mostly it's this book right here, has gotten me several hundred gigs. I mean, people see this book and they want to know more, so they invite me to their community to explain like what's in this book. How did I write it? Who else is in here? What are we trying to say? So yeah, awesome idea. Go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to say something else too. It also creates either a sense of trust or distrust, because when everything's documented, you know who somebody is, so I bet a lot of people treat you differently, because sometimes when you're just saying stuff, people don't necessarily believe it until you're able to back up your story. So then when people can read your story, it makes you more credible.
Yes, I think that is true. So I like to say that I'm always on the record. So when people call me and they want to know, Tom, what do you think about this? I say I'm always speaking for the public, even though it might be a private conversation, which is a shorthand of way of saying is I can back my shit up. So if I'm asserting something about civics in Chicago or America or whatever, yes, I have a strong opinion, but if you want, I can show you my work. I can send you the articles or whatever, if you're interested. And that's true in the book. So there's lots of footnotes here. It's not me. It's just there are 8 authors. I'm just one of them. But we like to say, here's if you want to check out the footnotes, you know what I mean? Go ahead. It's there for you. We're not just saying stuff and you have to take my word for it. That's not good civics. You may want to take my word for it, but I really shouldn't ask you to. If I'm saying something like I'm asserting that Chicago is not broke, that's the point of the book, where's my evidence? And you have a right to that evidence, Sarah. So just say Tom said something, but he didn't back it up. I don't know. Is he lying? Is he exaggerating? Is he fantasizing? Is he smoking weed? What's going on with him? All fair. It's all fair if I'm saying something that's a little controversial, and asserting that Chicago is not broke is, believe me, very controversial in this place. So you better have your stuff backed up. And so that's a good practice, even if you're not writing it down. So if you're someone who's going to be speaking in public, maybe, or I don't know, giving a presentation, do have your facts at your fingertips. So if somebody wants your data, Sarah, you can say, well, I can email it to you, or here's a piece of paper. Here's my remarks that I was asked to give a presentation about cybersecurity, for IC Stars, and I did a little homework, and here's my remarks. And by the way, here's my sources. So if you're interested, and you're right, that does make you a more credible, believable, and trustworthy, which is excellent. Let's see, what else did you talk about? You mentioned other countries. That's the first time we've heard something like that. What did you mean by kind of know what's going on in other countries?
When I said, or when we said this, I was thinking of a particular instance in fast fashion because fast fashion is bad for the environment anyway, anywhere, here, wherever, but also other countries are affected by that because you have these people working in like sweatshops and stuff and they're not getting a good quality of life. And that's something that we're supporting over here. So that's what I was thinking of. Is that like know what you're doing in every instance, like even if it seems small.
Very interesting. So that's an interesting kind of awareness or intentionality to say, well, like I like this sweater. I'm going to buy this sweater from from Walmart or whatever, and it's only $10, so it's a good bargain. But I'm not aware that it was made by child labor in Malaysia, and I don't care.
Bring
However,
seamstresses back.
yeah. So
let's start a protest right now, everybody.
So if you care, I mean, not everybody cares. I mean, sometimes I gotta shop cheap. I don't have a lot of money, so I gotta be mindful of my budget. But what you're saying is like the things that we do in America, maybe more so than many other countries, impacts so many other places. And labor is a big one. So the things that we buy and consume in America in vast quantities, they're made by human beings somewhere on the planet. And you could say, look, I don't really care about those guys. I want a bargain. So good luck to them. Or you can say, no, I'm going to do a little research and try to buy products as best I can within my budget, that where the labor is respected, it's not child labor, and they're not polluting the shit out of, they're not throwing all that stuff in the lake. They're not polluting the river. They're not hurting a black community in Mississippi because they don't care about them. So all the runoff, goes right into their water. Too bad for them. Yeah.
Also, buying from thrift stores helps prevent the waste of clothing as well, because in things like fast fashion, they get rid of it. It'll sit for a while and nobody will buy it, and then they just have to waste and burn clothes as well. So invest in your local thrift shops, everybody.
So there's a tip. Again, someone was talking about recycling. So we recycle, our cups and our bottles, but we can recycle other things. Like I love used bookstores. So I'll try to buy from my used bookstore all the time, and I give my books away to there's a nonprofit used bookstore in Chicago called Afterwards, and it's a nonprofit, and they have a lot of literacy programs. So they use the revenue from people giving in their books, and then they turn around and hire literacy tutors and stuff like that. So it's a double, triple win. So yeah, I like to buy new books all the time. My wife is always bawling me out for buying books that I don't read. I can't help myself. But I also like to go to the used bookstore, and that's a great thing to do. So yeah, recycle. So my friends, we have covered now the 3 domains very, very nicely. We'll put the summary of this work on the class website. But now it's time to share with the class what you guys actually did. So we just had a very robust conversation on civic activities, civic things we can do, things that we can try to build, and those kinds of activities that follow the brain and the heart. So here's what you guys have actually said that you have done. So this is again from our survey. Remember that you all took the survey. You can see the slide and the survey says, okay. So remember, this I tried to be exhaustive in this list. Obviously, there's some things that just I didn't cover, but it's pretty exhaustive. And I have to say, a lot of what you have reported in the breakout sessions kind of is already on that list. So now let's go back and look at the list and see what actually has Cycle One done by their way of self-reporting? So the number one thing that Cycle One says they did was that they have voted. So 10 of the 12 respondents said that, which is, to me, a very good outcome. It's certainly better than the average in America. So this is about, 90%, of your sample of 12. But in America, it's more like 60%. It's not great. And in Chicago, the last election we had for mayor, which was 2 years ago, or last year, was like 34%. That's terrible. Shame on Chicago. We can't figure that out. I don't know what it would be like for Kansas City. Maybe someone wants to look it up and ask and communicate that. When the last election for mayor was held in Kansas City, what was the turnout? The number two thing that you all said you did was, I have volunteered for a community group or a church. So why do you suppose that's such a popular one? If you are someone who did that, maybe you'll unmute and explain why you volunteered for a community group or a church.
Well, personally, for me, I grew up in the church, so it was easy. It's easy to always go back and do things, especially on the holidays, to go set up for Halloween and other stuff like that.
Sure, it's close to home. You've got
Yeah.
some history. Yes, those are usually maybe because your parents might have been involved in that particular organization. So
And it's not like my grandma forces me to do it. I do it because she doesn't have to force me.
You don't have to. So the elders has set a expectation on us. They modeled it for us, and we are pleased to do so. Yeah, so that's a very high activity. As I say, it was number two. Then after that comes, I have donated. So that was something that was mentioned several times by the groups, giving money. So, voting, big one, volunteering, big one, and then donating. So 7 of the 12 have donated. So if someone who's donated to a cause, could you tell us a little bit about why you did that?
I donated, I donated to the lupus walk, and it was for women. Well, it's for everybody, but the person I know that's affected by lupus, it was for a women's organization, and I donated because I've seen the effects that lupus has on someone's life, and I think it's crappy. I want to put in money to help them find more research to better their lives. And it started when I was younger, so I really didn't have much of a choice to go when we were going for those walks. But as I got older and seen actually what she had to go through, it actually made it more important for me. So I just go every year.
Okay.
I just want to say thanks for that, CC, because my sister has lupus and I know exactly what it looks like. Yeah, so thank you for that.
So that's a real world example. So something that affects you, the closer it is to you, the more likely, and it's just logical, that you will write them a check for $10, $50, $100, whatever it is you can afford, because you've seen it up close and personal. Which means the opposite. You can also imagine what it would be like if there was no help. What if your sister had no recourse? There was no place to go. There was no doctor. There was no medicine. There was no counseling. It'd be horrible. So you kind of see it both ways. You see the sort of the impact of a problem in your face, and you've also kind of seen how the help comes, and the help costs money. It didn't get there by accident. So I See Stars is a thing that people give money to. I have given money to I See Stars, and when you all graduate out of here, not too long from now, I think I mentioned this, you're going to get an email. It's going to say, please donate to I See Stars, and I hope you will, now that you've been a beneficiary of it. So donation is a big deal. America is a very generous country in regards to this. We donate collectively as a nation over $452 billion every year through all sources to charity. And about 2/3 of that is from individual donations. So if you're talking about foundations, corporate giving, there's a lot of ways, people write their wills. There's a lot of ways that people donate or institutions donate in America. But the biggest source of donations is the individual person who writes that check or puts the money in the pot or in the can at the church, when they pass the hat. And the biggest recipient of individual contributions are our religious institutions, which is very meaningful for people. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of these things that didn't get a lot of votes, that there's not a lot of activity around here. So 2 people said that they have participated in a public protest. So we already heard from somebody who did that. So who would like to tell us a little bit about protesting and where were you? What was the protest about? Ooh, go ahead. It looks like Aaron is trying to speak. Go ahead. Oh, no. Can you hear? I can't hear.
I can hear you, Aaron, but Tom can't hear you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Say your thing. Okay. Well, I need someone to translate for me because you heard and I didn't hear. So someone can recap what Aaron said, please.
She just said that she went to the Trump rally, and she had tickets to go, but became a protester when they thought she was a protester and wouldn't let her come in. And then she went to the protest for Black Lives Matter down at the Kansas City Plaza when they were shooting people with rubber bullets in the middle of their foreheads and tear gassing kids.
Oh my goodness. Well, I hope you're all right. So there's a lot of places to protest, and I have done my fair share. I got beat up by the cops in Boston in 1970. I'll tell you that story some other day. But
I was gonna say, elaborate. But I guess I'll have to get a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah, you're gonna have to book the meeting, Zoya. I'll tell you everything offline. So protesting is something that's an American tradition. It goes all the way back to the founding of this country. You may have heard of something called the Boston Tea Party. You look that up. So
yeah,
we're a feisty country. We're not as feisty as some other countries that take it to the streets pretty regularly, but we do have a history of protest, and it's a robust one, and we should not forget it. Sometimes you have to make a fuss, or as the great John Lewis used to say, beautiful trouble. He was somebody who did civil disobedience in the Deep South when you couldn't vote, Black people couldn't vote, and you couldn't be registered to vote. So just getting 5 Black people together in the Deep South in the 1950s, you were breaking the law, and so being out in public and protesting is something that is part of the American democratic tradition. Let's see. I have volunteered for a political candidate. We have one person who said that, and I have participated in a boycott and a boycott, one person each. I appreciate that Group 4 added to the mix running for office. Nobody has run for office. I don't expect that to have happened for this group. And in the history of IC Stars, I've doing this workshop for many years. Nobody's ever confessed that they run for office. However, I have. I found that.
I've never run for office, but I've sat on a board.
Oh,
before.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've sat in Uh, I was I was I was in foster care, and Missouri has a youth advisory board, and I sat on there, and I represented in my district. And then back when Governor Greitens was the governor here in Missouri, I got to sit on a panel and speak to his wife because she was into legislation and policy for foster kids. And I would run, maybe not for office, but something like that for sure.
Okay. Well, that's another way of giving service. Not necessarily running for office, but that would be more like an appointed position. So you're put on a board or a commission of some nature, and yes, so then you're sort of representing in a way a group of people, and that's a responsibility that is excellent. Yes, so that's a public service kind of a role that is possible to serve in that way. I ran for Cook County Board President in 2010, and there's some images from my campaign. We have a thing in the African American community here called the Bud Billiken Day Parade in August. It's like the hottest day of the year. Hundreds of thousands of people come out. There you see me walking with my colleagues. It's probably 95 degrees. And that's all part of the deal. You can see me there giving my campaign announcement. I got a big banner behind me. You can see a bumper sticker. That's actually an image of a bumper sticker that I made. So I did all that stuff, go door to door, go to debates, go to forums, go into a newspaper, to the Chicago Tribune, and tell them why they should endorse me. I did all that. So I was the Green Party candidate and got 55,000 votes. Now, Cook County is a big county. The woman who won, Toni Preckwinkle, she's still in office. She got 940,000 votes. So again, as a third party candidacy, I think I raised maybe $10,000. But I have to say, I was taken seriously. Even so, I was given respect, and I was on the same stage as Alderman. She was a city councilwoman at the time, and she's deep experience, many years experience. But I was treated in the same way she was, which was nice, and as well as the incumbent, the man who was trying to defend his position, the incumbent Cook County Board President, and we were all on the same stage together, and that's pretty heady stuff. And again, it's not for everybody. I would say it's more likely that people will help people run for office. That's also a beautiful thing if you're helping someone run in some way. But it could be that someone on this call in some future minute will actually stand for office as a city council person, maybe, school board, maybe, who knows? State representative, maybe we're looking at a mayor here, Brenda Ross, who knows, You don't know.
I'm for sure voting for Brenda.
Yeah.
You have my vote.
Excellent. All I'm saying is I'm looking at the people that I want to see lead me. Okay. You're looking at, and you are with the people who can lead and who will lead. You wouldn't be an IC Stars if it weren't the case. And so we just put this idea in your pipe, and you can smoke it later. This idea of running for office or helping someone run, that's a big deal. And again, it's a lot. There's a lot to do on the way, but I'm just saying, maybe in the future, who knows? All right. Any other comments before we close out today? Nope. We're good? All right, my friends. Thank you so much. This was a great session.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Tom, would you run for office again?
My wife has forbidden it.
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
She wants him.
If you could, what would you run for?
I'm an old dude. Come on, I'm old. It's up.
Yes, it's time for him to enjoy his wife. Leave him alone.
You gotta.
If you could run, what would you run for?
Oh, I guess I would run for mayor.
And what's your slogan?
If I was 20 years younger. 20
for
years
mayor.
Younger. Yeah, run for mayor. But in the meantime, have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you for session 4, where it's all going to be you. Remember, you've got 6-minute presentations. Please upload them by, if you can, by Wednesday, and send me the URLs. Okay. All right, everybody, have a great week. We'll see you for our final session 1 week from today.